Well, welcome back. If you're trying to help the environment, trying to get your family healthier, there's hope. And it all has to do with one word in the title of this book. See, it's slightly greener. It's a slightly greener method. And you don't have to do it all at once. The author of the book, The Slightly Greener Method, Tanya Harris, is joining us right now. Welcome. And I have to say, you know, when you think about going greener, you think it's going to cost more. Maybe the kids won't like it. But easing into it is not so hard, right?
Right. I really think that when we take out, we have to do everything all at once. It makes it more sustainable. It takes out that overwhelm because I remember being home when I first started and like thinking I had to toss everything all at once. But that also makes it so much easier to quit. And since we can't really avoid everything, it's actually easier to create those smaller, more manageable steps that can create sustainable change. And that's really what this is all about, is creating that change that makes it easier to fit into our lifestyle so we're more likely to stick with it.
And so, Tanya, what inspired you to go green in the first place? I know you have a little bit of a backstory with your son, correct?
Right. Back in 2006 in second grade, he started showing attention issues, and I met with the teacher, but I asked for a little bit more time before we actually tested. And I'm a childhood cancer survivor also. So I think it was always being told, be careful what you eat. I was thinking maybe it was something in our home that was contributing to his symptoms. So I went home and I researched for a long time, but actually just made a couple simple changes. And when I went back to the school just a few weeks later, they didn't want to test him anymore. So I became hooked. But what I also realized is that labels are so confusing and there's so many different ingredient names to memorize that I really couldn't do all of it. So I started thinking, what if I just started doing a couple of ingredients that had to do with his condition, research those, cut those out, and then move on from there. So that's when I really realized I was driving myself and my family too crazy at first, trying to remove everything. So I started by just removing a couple things at a time. And pretty soon it became automatic. It was really easy.
Right. I think so many parents and families out there, they don't realize how many harsh chemicals are in everyday products, you know, that we use. So what are some 3 tips that you advise people to help them go slightly greener?
Oh, sure. Well, the first one is, and these are just kind of the tips I give overall, because again, we want this to fit into our lifestyle because then we're more likely to stick with it. So the first thing I usually recommend is start with your why. And this is kind of the umbrella thing I have everyone do, is once you start with your why, you realize why you're doing this. So when it gets a little tougher, or actually also gives you those ingredient names that you'll concentrate on. So for instance, mine was artificial colors. That was one of mine. And so I knew when I picked up a product that I was just not going to buy that product. That was a deal breaker for me. So number one is find out what ingredients you want to avoid. Start there with your deal breakers. The next one is the 80-20 rule, which works for so many things, but especially toxins too, because if we can do the healthy thing 80% of the time, we don't have to worry so much about that 20% of the time where we can't control it, or our kids are at a friend's house, or we're traveling. We don't have to worry so much. And the last one is choose your top 1 or 2. And these are the top 1 or 2 most used, most toxic products in your home that you use most often. Or 2 first. And then just keep building on from there. And pretty soon you'll have a pretty safe, non-toxic household.
And so for people at home, what are maybe some ingredients that they should be on the lookout for that they might think are safe, but they're really not?
Something like natural flavors and carrageenan, if I'm saying that correctly, things like that are marketed that sound natural, but there's also a lot of chemicals that can hide in something like natural flavors. Carrageenan comes from seaweed, but it actually has been shown to have some health effects. Another one is fragrance, because we don't know what's in that term. It could be dozens of different chemicals that could be toxic to the brain and nervous system or allergenic. So making sure that we educate ourselves, because that's really why I wanted to write my book, is there's so many things out there that are marketed that we don't know necessarily what's in them. So we need to educate ourselves so we know what to buy.
All good to know. Thank you so much, Tanya.
Thank you so much.